These are crucial amendments. There's others from other parties which would have a similar effect in terms of actually meaning that this aspect of the legislation does something in terms of those who are facing 8% rent increases, does something meaningful as opposed to just pretending to do something meaningful. I'll give you a story about Jane, who came to me about this over a month ago, talking about the €160 a month rent increase that she was facing. It's almost 8%, up to €2,140 a month. She lives with her kids in an extremely ordinary house in Tallaght. I know her because she was previously in the homeless hub in the Aberley. She was involved in organising the homeless people, overwhelmingly women, there into a very effective campaign. It took her a long time to get the place that she got in terms of being on HAP, but she finally has somewhere. And now she's faced post-pandemic. She isn't one of these people who signed a form. She doesn't qualify for signing the form. She's not one of the 500. She's faced with an 8% rent increase. And that was the case that I first raised with Taoiseach, and then raised with the Taoiseach. And we heard that something will be done. Something will be done to make sure that this doesn't happen. The Minister for Housing will come and act and do something about it. And she said this to me. I've said, well, maybe the landlord will back off. And she said, no, not my landlord. He won't be backing off. He's going to go ahead and look for the 8%, but she can't afford to pay. And you know, that's the basic point, is that what the minister's doing here doesn't affect the vast majority of renters in the state. They can all still be subject to 8% rent increases. For the hundreds of people who are protected, they can be subject to 12% rent increases next year. And our Amendment 15, would deal with that by saying that landlords can't kind of accumulate these non-imposed rent increases during this pause of rent increases and then get it all later on, that you get your 4% every year and you get to impose it. And if you don't accept the amendment, and I'm not shocked that you're not accepting the amendment, then you're not doing much for these people at all. You know, you're just pretending to do something. And kind of in the flurry of announcements in terms of housing, hope that people think, oh, well, something happened. But obviously so many people are affected by this that those people will realise that the government did not take any significant action. The other aspect of our amendments is Amendment 14, which is in terms of imposing a freeze and a ban on evictions. We've seen the figures that in the course of the pandemic, over 1,000 households were issued with eviction notices. We're going to see, or we're certainly very likely to see, a significant number of eviction notices coming now in the next number of months. I'm aware of a number in terms of constituents that I've been dealing with. People have eviction notices for August, September, October. Thousands and thousands potentially. At a time when the government is cutting the PUP, announcing that the economy is going to take off like a rocket, but rents are going through the roof. People are faced with 8% rent increases, cuts to their PUP, and many people won't be able to afford to pay. And you have the situation that Deputy Boyd Barrett referred to earlier, where almost 1% of the population has been homeless over the past number of years. How many more people are going to be added onto the list as a result of this? So it's a simple amendment to extend the ban on evictions. One thing I'd be interested in terms of why the government and the minister won't accept it is are you making a case that this is unconstitutional? Because no, you're not. Interesting. Well then do it. If you're not hiding behind the fact that it's unconstitutional, which I wouldn't agree with, then simply do it. Yeah, I'll wait and hear the answer to the minister.
Okay, Minister. Sorry, Deputy Smith, were you offering? I beg your pardon?
What amendments are we speaking to at the moment?
You were speaking to Amendment number 2, Section 1.
214.
You can move your one later.
214 and 50.
Okay, yeah. Grant, yeah.
Okay. Minister.
Yeah, and look, thank the deputies for tabling the amendments. There's just a couple of things. I can't accept the amendments. I'm going to tell you why. But I do want to just inform the House that no one's pretending to do anything. These are real measures that were actually brought in last July, and we've extended them since, and we've brought forward some permanent changes around the whole area of rent arrears, around deposit restrictions, minimum notice periods that are non-pandemic related. And like, there were members here who speak to these amendments, and that's fine. I'm not having a go at them for doing it, who opposed this original legislation. I'm glad since then that people have seen fit, and the House, with unanimity, has accepted the extensions. Now, I'll deal with the issue of the rent increases in a moment. I just want to explain why these amendments can't be accepted, 2, 14 and 15, the last count, Corla. They propose to amend Part 2 of the Emergency Measures in the Public Interest COVID-19 Act 2020. And Part 2 of that Act actually ceased operation since the 1st of August. So with effect from the 27th of March 2020, the Emergency Measures in the Public Interest COVID Act made those exceptional provisions in relation to the blanket eviction ban and the blanket rent increase ban in the public interest in order to mitigate the effect of the spread of COVID-19 in relation to the operation of certain provisions of the 2004 Act during that 3-month emergency period following its enactment, and during such further period if it was specified by government to do so. The emergency period under Part 2 of the Act that your amendments are linked to was extended by the government on the 19th of June and again on the 20th of July 2020, having regard to the threat to public health, obviously, the highly contagious nature of the disease, and the need to restrict movement of people. As I've said, Part 2, though, of the Emergency Measures in the Public Interest Act 2020 relating to rental measures ultimately ceased to operate with effect from the 1st of August 2020. And it's a matter for the Bills Officer, as to these amendments being in order. I understand the thrust of them, but they would be, they're actually linked to legislation that has actually ceased. The amendments proposed by the deputies are the provisions of an act that are now spent and no longer in operation. So I couldn't actually accept them. I wouldn't be in a position to, even should I wish. I do want to update the deputies on this in relation to and we will discuss this further on because there are further amendments about the issue of the RPZs and rent increases that the Taoiseach has rightly said that we will address it. Firstly, I have advised the House before that we will be bringing forward a significant rent and tenancy reform bill in the autumn. But in advance of that as well, we are working on measures. This bill is at report or committee and report stage right now. We're working on other measures with regard to deal with the rent increase issue, and I hope to be able to conclude the work on that very, very shortly. It isn't as simple, and I don't mean this in any condescending way at all. It's not as simple as some has presented. There are things that need to be worked through. The RPZs expire at the end of this year. I've said time and time again that we'll be replacing them certainly with something better, and that's my intention in the autumn to do that. But what I need to see is what I can do in the short term in advance of the recess, and I am working on that. I can't go into any more detail on it because I don't want there to be any unintended consequences by me making any comment that might lead to something else on it. But I do want to assure deputies that that is being worked on, that will come back to this House when the work is ready on it. These specific amendments, so 2, 14 and 15, I've explained why in real terms I can't accept them. I wouldn't anyway in the sense of where they're at, because they're focused at a section of an act that ceased. So I can't accept them, 2, 14 and 15.
Yeah. On the substantive issue, the Minister says that we're not pretending to do something. There's no pretending to do something about it. But the issue here, or like the issue that we're discussing here, is the issue about people facing 8% rent increases. That became a significant issue, so much so that the Fine Gael by-election candidate was forced to say that this is a revelation, it's outrageous, and again call on you to do something about it. It became a political issue that the government was forced to respond to. And in terms of that issue, the government is effectively doing nothing. That's the reality. The vast, vast majority of people who are out there who have either already received notice of rent increases of up to 8%, or are waiting to see if they'll receive them in the next number of months, nothing changes for them. The same situation is there. So then the comfort that the minister gives them is, well, don't worry, we're working on it. We're working on something in the background, and we'll come back with it in autumn. But like, that will be too late for Jane. It will be too late for many of the people that I cited previously in the Dáil, because their rent increases are already posed. Someone can get an 8% rent increase tomorrow. That can happen right now, and the government isn't doing anything about it. So to deal with the substance, I mean, does the minister agree, even if he says he can't do it within this and can't accept the amendments and so on, but does he agree that the effect of the period of COVID shouldn't be counted towards kind of getting more than a 4% rent increase? Does he agree that landlords shouldn't be able to take advantage of the fact that they couldn't increase rents for a period of time, that they can't now take advantage of it? Does he agree with that politically? Is that his aim? Does he want to achieve that? Or is it only for those 100 who signed the form to say their incomes are affected by COVID, are they the only ones who deserve the protection of not facing a higher than 4% rent increase? That's the key point, because we'll get to this again in terms of other amendments and getting clarity on that, because I believe very firmly that the way the government has spoken around this issue has been to give the impression that something is being done for all those who could be facing up to an 8% rent increase, when in reality something is being done for a tiny, tiny minority of those.
Okay, and Tara?
I'll ask Count Court. I've very little else to say other than I've outlined why I'm not accepting these amendments. We are actually, and I've been doing very detailed work in relation to the rent increase issue. I expect to be able to bring to conclusion very shortly. I've said that. If some members don't want to accept that, fine. But this whole issue is not about pretending it's a serious issue. I know members opposite take this seriously too. What fundamentally we're doing here is extending protections and provisions. The amendments that are tabled here, just to reiterate, and it's factual, would amend Part 2 of the Act that ceased to be in operation since the 1st of August 2020. I can't accept 2, 14 or 15, and I've outlined why.
Thank you, Minister.